Oma was a poor widow, raising 2 children alone in a small mud hut at the edge of the village. Life had been harsh since her husband's death, and every day seemed like a battle against hunger. Yet she woke up each morning, determined to give Hugo and little Zora a chance at life. On this particular morning, she rose before the sun, balancing her clay pot on her head, and walked toward the river. The path was quiet except for the songs of early birds, and she hummed softly to keep her strength. After filling her pot, Oma decided to take a shortcut home. It was not her usual path, but she wanted to return quickly before the sun grew hot. As she walked, she suddenly froze. Voices drifted from the bush nearby. She crouched low, her heart pounding, and listened carefully. 3 hunters sat under a tree, speaking in low but eager tones. "We caught her last night," one of them said. "A mermaid. And not just that, she carries a child." Another hunter laughed greedily. "Double money, my friends. Whoever buys her will pay more than gold." Oma's hand trembled against the clay pot. A mermaid. She had heard stories of river spirits, half woman, half fish, but she never imagined such a creature would be real. The hunters boasted about their plan, speaking of ropes and traps, of the wealth they would gain. Oma felt both fear and pity twist inside her. She did not understand why fate had let her overhear their secret, but she knew at that moment her life was about to change. She carefully rose, deciding she would not continue along that path. Whatever the hunters had done, she wanted no part of it. Yet the thought of a helpless, pregnant creature bound by ropes tugged painfully at her chest. She hurried down another trail, her mind restless, not knowing that destiny was already waiting just ahead. The new path was longer, winding through tall grass and uneven ground, but Oma pressed on. Her thoughts were troubled by what she had heard. She imagined a woman, helpless and tied, her cries muffled by the thick forest. Why would men be so cruel? Oma shook her head, trying to convince herself that this was not her problem. She had children to think of, mouths to feed, and no strength to fight hunters. Then came the sound that stopped her in her tracks, a soft, mournful cry, like a wounded child. Oma's breath caught in her throat. She set down her pot and followed the sound cautiously. Pushing aside the tall grass, she saw something that stole the air from her lungs. There, bound tightly to a bamboo tree, was a woman unlike any she had ever seen. Her face was delicate, her skin pale as river clay, her hair long and black, falling over her shoulders. But below her waist stretched a shining silver tail that glittered even in the dim light. Oma's knees weakened. The hunter's story was true. The woman lifted her head, her eyes wide with pain and fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Help me, before they return. They will kill me and my child." Oma's heart battled her mind. Every tale she had heard warned against helping water spirits. Yet what stood before her was no monster, only a mother in need. With trembling hands, Oma reached for the ropes. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "My name is Nnenna," the mermaid answered. "And I beg you, do not leave me here." Oma looked back at the path she had come from. She could almost hear the hunters' voices in the wind. Fear pressed hard on her chest, but compassion was stronger. She had known suffering, and she could not walk away from another woman's pain. She knelt quickly, tugging at the cruel ropes that cut into Nnenna's skin. Just then, a rustle of leaves made her heart race. The hunters were returning. Oma's hands shook as she fumbled with the knots. The ropes were thick, hardened with the hunter's sweat, and her fingers burned as she pulled. Nnenna's breath came shallow and fast, her eyes darting toward the bushes. "They are close," Nnenna whispered urgently. "Please, hurry." Oma bit her lip. Her heart thundered so loudly she was sure it would give them away. Then came the unmistakable crack of a twig. Heavy footsteps followed, and voices rose from the nearby path. The hunters were indeed returning. One of them barked, "Let us check on the price before we go after the antelope tracks." Oma's blood turned cold. She pushed harder at the knot, but it refused to give way. Her clay pot lay forgotten in the grass. For a moment, she thought of her children, Hugo and Zora, waiting for her at home. If the hunters caught her here, what would become of them? "Go," Nia said suddenly, her voice faint but firm. "Leave me. They will kill you if they find us together." But Oma shook her head fiercely. "No. I will not." Her husband's death had left her with nothing but her children, and yet she had survived. Fear had followed her for years, but today she would not let it decide for her. The hunter's laughter grew nearer, and Oma's mind raced. Then, as if fate itself stepped in, a rustling sound startled the men. An antelope burst across the trail, its brown coat flashing in the sunlight. "Look," one hunter shouted. "Meat for the evening." Without a second thought, two of them charged after the animal, crashing through the bushes with spears raised. The third muttered something about keeping watch but eventually followed, eager not to lose the chase. Oma wasted no time. She pressed her knee into the knot, twisting hard until the rope loosened. Nia gasped as the bonds fell away, her wrists raw and red. "You are free," Oma whispered breathlessly, grabbing the mermaid's arm. "But we must move." Nia tried to stand, but the weight of her pregnancy and the weakness from her wounds made her stumble. Her silver tail glistened faintly as it shifted into legs, shaky, pale legs that seemed too fragile to bear her. She wavered, and Oma threw her arm around her shoulders, bearing most of the weight. They moved slowly, their feet dragging across the forest floor. Every sound made Oma's skin prickle. She half expected the hunters to come storming back at any moment, furious and armed. But luck was with them. The cries of the hunters chasing the antelope echoed far away, fading into the distance. At last, when they were beyond sight of the bamboo tree, Oma let out a shaky laugh of relief. Her heart still pounded, but she allowed herself one thought: we are alive. Nia, pale and trembling, touched Oma's hand. "You risked your life for me. I will never forget this." Oma shook her head, steadying her steps. "Save your strength. We still have far to go." And so, under the shadow of tall trees and with danger behind them, two women, one human, one not, began a journey that neither would ever forget. The forest seemed endless as Oma guided Nia through the narrow path. The mermaid's steps were weak and uncertain, her body heavy with child. Each movement looked like it caused her pain, but she refused to stop. Oma wrapped her arm tightly around Nia's waist, supporting most of her weight, though her own back ached from the effort. "We will rest soon," Oma said gently, even as her breath came in sharp bursts. Sweat dripped down her forehead and dampened her wrapper. She thought of the hunters, their angry faces, their sharp weapons, and pressed forward with renewed strength. She could not allow them to catch up. Nia's face was pale, her long hair clinging to her damp skin. "I am slowing you down," she whispered. "No," Oma replied firmly. "You are alive. That is what matters. My children will understand if I return late." They stumbled on until Oma found a fallen tree. She lowered Nia carefully onto it. The mermaid gasped with relief, closing her eyes for a moment. Oma knelt beside her, brushing strands of hair from her face. In that instant, Oma no longer saw a river spirit but a weary mother desperate to protect her unborn child. The silence of the forest was broken by the chirping of birds and the hum of insects. Oma's heart still raced, but for the first time since freeing Nia, she allowed herself to breathe. She reached into her small basket and brought out roasted yam she had carried from home. "Eat," she urged. Nia looked at the food as though she hadn't seen such kindness in a long time. With trembling hands, she took a bite. "You are brave, Oma. Others would have left me to die." Oma shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I am only doing what I hope someone would do for me if I were in your place. After a short rest, they rose again, though Nia's steps grew heavier with each passing minute. The mud hut where Oma lived still lay far ahead, but Oma's determination never wavered. She thought of Hugo's serious face and Zora's playful laughter. They were waiting for her. If they saw Nia, she prayed they would understand. The sun had climbed high when they finally reached the edge of the village. Oma's arms shook from carrying Nia, but she held on, refusing to let her collapse. With careful steps, she led her through the back path, away from curious eyes. At last, the little mud hut came into view, cracked walls, thatched roof, and smoke rising faintly from a small fire outside. Oma felt her chest tighten with relief. She had brought Nia to safety. She pushed open the wooden door, guiding Nia inside. The room was dim and small, but it was warm, and it was safe. Oma helped her onto a mat and hurried to fetch warm water. Nia sank down with a sigh, her body trembling but her eyes shining with gratitude. Oma sat beside her, dipping a cloth into the water and gently cleaning the bruises on her wrist. She walked quietly, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. When Nia whispered, "Thank you," Oma only nodded. In that fragile silence, a bond was forming between the poor widow and the mermaid, two women bound not by blood, but by courage and need. Neither of them knew what danger still lurked, but for that moment, in the safety of the little hut, hope flickered like a small flame in the dark. The air inside the hut was heavy with the smell of damp earth and smoke from the cooking fire. Oma sat close to Nia, dabbing her wounds with warm water. The mermaid's skin was delicate, bruised where the hunter's ropes had dug into her flesh. Nia winced but did not complain. She looked around the small hut with tired eyes, as though taking in the humble home that now sheltered her. "You have little, yet you share it with me," she said softly. Oma's hand paused. "I cannot turn my back on a mother carrying a child. I know that pain too well." Her voice broke slightly, but she quickly steadied it. She did not wish to recall the hunger and hardship she had faced since her husband's death. Before Nia could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps approached. Oma's heart leapt. She glanced at the door, her mind racing. If it was the hunters? A sharp knock rattled the wooden frame. "Oma!" a familiar voice called. "Open the door." It was Mama Jodica, the village gossip. Fear shot through Oma. The woman's sharp eyes missed nothing, and her tongue spread rumors faster than fire. If she saw Nia, the whole village would know before nightfall. Oma stood quickly, pressing a finger to her lips to silence Nia. She hurried to the door, cracking it just enough to peek out. "Mama Jodica, what brings you here?" The older woman tried to push the door wider, but Oma blocked it with her body. "I saw you pass the river this morning," Jodica said, narrowing her eyes. "And I see you did not return with your water pot. What happened? Did something break? Tell me." Oma forced a laugh, though her palms were sweating. "Oh, Mama, it slipped from my hands and shattered on the rocks. I was so angry, I came home quickly. My children are waiting, I cannot waste time with you now." Jodica tilted her head, suspicious. She sniffed the air as though she could sense a secret hiding inside. "Then why are you sweating like a thief?" she pressed. Oma raised her voice deliberately, pretending to be annoyed. "Because I am tired. I carried firewood earlier, and now you want to question me as if I am a child. Leave me be, Mama. If you want a story, find another mouth to feed your gossip." Her sharp tone startled Jodica, who pulled back with a huff. "Very well. But mark my words, Oma, you cannot hide everything from me." She turned and shuffled away, muttering to herself. Oma shut the door quickly, her back pressed against it. Her knees trembled, but relief washed over her. From the mat, Nia whispered, "You are clever. But can you keep me hidden for long?" Before Oma could answer, her son Hugo pushed open the back door. He stopped short, his eyes widening as he saw the stranger on the mat. For a moment, he was frozen. Then his face twisted with fear. "Mama! Who is she? What is that?" His gaze dropped to the shimmer of Nia's silver tail, half hidden beneath Omar's wrapper. Omar crossed the room quickly, kneeling before him. She took his shoulders in her hands. "Hugo, listen to me. She is not a monster. She is a woman in need of help, just like us. You must not fear her." But his voice quivered. "She is not like us." "No," Omar said softly. "But her heart is like ours. She is carrying a child. Would you want anyone to harm me when I carried you?" The boy's lips trembled. Slowly, he shook his head. He glanced back at Nia, who gave him a weak but gentle smile. Something in her eyes calmed him. Hugo swallowed hard. "I will not tell. I promise." Omar exhaled in relief, hugging him close. For the first time, she felt hope that her secret could be kept safe, at least within her own family. But outside, the world was already stirring. The hunters had begun their search, and danger was creeping closer with each passing hour. The next morning, the village was unsettled. Rumors drifted through the air like smoke. The hunters were moving from house to house, searching for what they called a thief who had taken their prize. Omar could hear their loud voices from her hut as they questioned families, demanding to know who had been near the river. Inside the hut, Omar tried to keep calm. She gave Zora a small task of grinding pepper while Hugo pretended to play outside, keeping watch. Nia lay on the mat, her hands resting protectively on her swollen belly. Her tail shimmered faintly, though she had tried to hide it under a wrapper Omar lent her. The mermaid's eyes were heavy with worry. "They are close," she whispered. "I can feel it. They will not stop until they find me." Omar poured water into a calabash and held it out. "Drink. You need your strength." She forced her voice to sound steady, though her heart pounded with fear. She could not imagine what would happen if the hunters discovered Nia here. Soon, heavy fists banged against her door. "Omar," one of the hunters barked. "Open this door." Hugo darted inside, whispering, "Mama, it is them." Omar nodded quickly. She covered Nia with a thick cloth and motioned for her to stay silent. Then she opened the door with a calm face. The three hunters stood there, their eyes sharp and restless. "We hear someone left a pot at the river yesterday," one said. "And we know you fetch water there often. Tell us what you saw." Omar folded her arms and leaned against the doorway. "I saw nothing. My pot slipped and broke. That is why I came home empty-handed." The tallest hunter narrowed his eyes. "Are you sure? You are sweating too much for someone with nothing to hide." Omar forced a tired laugh. "Come inside if you think I hide a broken pot. Perhaps you will find the pieces and carry them home as a gift." The hunters looked at one another. For a tense moment, Omar feared they would enter. But the leader spat on the ground and waved his hand. "She is only a poor widow. Let us go. We waste time here." They turned and left, their voices fading as they moved to the next house. Omar closed the door softly, her knees giving way beneath her. She sat on the floor, her chest rising and falling fast. Nia uncovered herself, her eyes wet with gratitude. "You risk everything for me. But I cannot stay here any longer. Your home will not remain safe." Omar shook her head stubbornly. "You are weak. Where will you go?" Nia touched her hand gently. "The river calls me. In its water, my strength will return. If I remain here, you and your children will suffer. The hunters will never stop searching." That night, under the cover of darkness, Omar wrapped a cloth around her shoulders and helped Nia to her feet. Together they slipped through the quiet village, avoiding the paths where lanterns glowed. The air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the night. At the riverbank, the water glistened like silver under the moonlight. Nia paused, turning to Oma. Her voice was low, filled with emotion. You gave me life when others gave me chains. I will not forget you. She stepped into the water, her legs dissolving into her shimmering tail once more. The river seemed to embrace her, ripples glowing as if alive. Nia glanced back one last time, her eyes soft. When you see the dawn, remember, you have a friend in the water. Then she disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only the gentle sound of flowing waves. Oma stood there, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She had carried a secret heavier than her clay pot, and now it was gone. But in her heart, she knew her life would never be the same again. For days after Nia's departure, Oma lived in quiet fear. Each time footsteps passed her heart leapt. She worried the hunters might return, searching more thoroughly, but they never did. Slowly, the village returned to its rhythm, women going to the river, children playing in the dust, men boasting of their hunts. To most, it seemed like nothing unusual had happened. But Oma knew the truth. She worked harder than ever, keeping her mind busy. Hugo gathered firewood, Zara helped pound yam, and together they survived on the little food they had. Yet every night, when she lay down to rest, Oma thought of the mermaid. She wondered if Nia had safely delivered her child, if the river had healed her wounds, if she still remembered the poor widow who had risked everything for her. 7 nights after their farewell, Oma rose early, before the first rooster crowed. She stepped outside to fetch water from the clay jar at her doorway. But something unusual caught her eye. Just by the threshold, where the earth was still damp from the night dew, stood 3 small boxes. Oma froze. The boxes shimmered faintly, as though touched by moonlight. With trembling hands, she lifted the first one. It was heavier than stone. She opened it and gasped. Inside lay shining gold beads, the kind worn only by chiefs and their wives. The second box held coral of the deepest red, polished and glowing as though fresh from the sea. The third overflowed with silver coins, each stamped with marks Oma had never seen before. Her legs gave way beneath her. She knelt on the earth, her eyes filling with tears. There was no doubt. These were gifts from Nia, a token of gratitude, a promise kept. When Hugo came out, rubbing his sleepy eyes, he stopped short at the sight. "Mama," he whispered, awe in his voice, "where did this come from?" Oma pulled him close. "It is a blessing, my son. A blessing for kindness." She did not tell anyone else. She knew the danger of greed in men's hearts. Quietly, she sold a few of the beads and coins in the next town, far from gossiping tongues. With the money, she bought land and built a larger house with strong walls and a new roof. She planted a farm that soon bore food enough for her family and more. The villagers were astonished. They whispered about Oma's sudden fortune. Some said she had found a hidden treasure, others claimed her late husband had left wealth behind. Mama Jodica, as expected, spread the loudest stories, but Oma only smiled and said nothing. Within a season, the poor widow who once begged for firewood had become the wealthiest woman in the village. Yet Oma never grew proud. She fed the hungry, clothed orphans, and gave freely to those in need. Each time she did, she remembered Nia's tear-filled eyes at the river and the words she had spoken, "You gave me life when others gave me chains." One evening, as the sun set in golden streaks across the sky, Oma sat outside her new home, watching her children play. Hugo was taller now, protective of his little sister, while Zora's laughter rang through the air like music. Oma's heart swelled with quiet joy. She whispered a prayer of thanks, not to the hunters who had brought danger, nor to fortune itself, but to the mermaid whose trust she had earned. Somewhere in the depths of the river, Nia lived on, her child safe, her promise fulfilled. And so Oma's story became a quiet legend of its own, not of greed or power, but of kindness, proof that a single act of courage could change a life forever.